Good afternoon, and welcome to today's CLC's lecture on Innovation District, Past, Present, and Future. I'm Shi Hui from the Center for Livable Cities, and I'll be your MC today. The CLC lecture series is organized by the Center for Livable Cities as part of our mission to distill, create, and share knowledge on livable and sustainable cities. Today, we are delighted to have with us 3 panelists who each have a major stake in the field of innovation districts and who have contributed significantly to CLC's latest urban system study on this topic, which we will launch later in today's program. We have panelists Dr. Tan Chin Nam, Chairman of Global Fusion Capital Private Limited, also a Senior Corporate Advisor and former Permanent Secretary. Dr. Tan had 33 years of distinguished service in the public service, holding various key appointments before completing his term as Permanent Secretary in 2007. He played a leading role in the information technology, economic, tourism, manpower, library, media, arts, and creative industries development of Singapore, and has held various top public leadership positions, including General Manager and Chairman of National Computer Board, Managing Director of Economic Development Board, Chief Executive of Singapore Tourism Board, Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Manpower and Ministry of Information, Communications and Arts, Chairman of National Library Board, as well as Media Development Authority. We are also pleased to have with us Mr. David Tan, Assistant Chief Executive Officer, Development Group of JTC. Mr. Tan has over 2 decades of professional experience in the multitude of areas from leadership and management, engineering and innovation to industry development, having been involved in the planning, design, construction, and project management of major infrastructure, building, and reclamation projects. From Ascendas-Singbridge Group, we are happy to have with us Mr. Manohar Khiatani, Deputy Group CEO of Ascendas-Singbridge. Mr. Khiatani formerly served as the CEO of JTC, where he spearheaded the development of specialized infrastructure solutions for various sectors and positioned the organization as an industrial infrastructure innovator. Prior to JTC, he was the Deputy Managing Director at the Economic Development Board, where he played an instrumental role in the development and transformation of important sectors in Singapore's economy, including infocoms and media. We are also delighted to have Dr. Arthur Au to moderate today's discussion on Innovation District. Dr. Au is the Executive Director of Kimen Group. He was the Director of Land Planning at JTC, and he was intimately involved in One North from the very beginning, from its conceptualization to the planning and development of Biopolis and Fusionopolis. Dr. Au was also the former Chief Development Planning Officer and Deputy Chief Real Estate Development Officer of the Ascendas-Singbridge Group. On top of that, Dr. Au holds a PhD from the Architectural Association London, where his thesis focused on large-scale integrated workspace development such as One North, as well as the development strategy of new generation of innovation environments in the knowledge economy. We are very honored today to have with us guest of honor, Mr. Philip Yeo, Chairman of Economic Development Innovation Singapore, EDIS. Mr. Yeo is widely recognized for his outstanding contributions to Singapore's economic development and his pioneering role in the promotion and development of the country's information technology, semiconductor, chemical industries, and biomedical sciences. He was the chairman of A-STAR, Agency for Science, Technology and Research, focused on building up the public scientific research capabilities. Mr. Yeo recruited leading international researchers to work on biomedical research in Singapore's biomedical hub, Biopolis, launched the overseas and local training of 1,000 PhDs over 10 years in biomedical science, physical science, and engineering. He also served as Special Advisor for Economic Development in the Prime Minister's Office and served as former Chairman Spring Singapore, amongst other top leadership positions. Before we begin today's panel discussion, may I first invite Mr. Yeo on stage to address us with the opening remarks. Mr. Yeo, please.
Well, thank you, Teng Chai, for inviting me here. First and foremost, I must confess I got a bug. So my ears are jammed, my throat is sore, so I will say very few words. Well, I'll try to explain the good work done by CLC in having this One North review with Chinam, David, and Manohar, and Alan here. Just give you a background of how biopolis first started so people realize that this is not some long-term strategic plan. This is actually an accident. In 1999, I was in UC California, San Francisco, attending a dinner hosted by Dr. Michael Bishop, Nobel Prize in 1989, so 10 years after he was Chancellor of UC San Francisco. So at the dinner, it says I have problems of land in UCSF, so I have a friend or business partner came and proposed to create a new piece of place for biomedical research called near the city harbor area called Mission Bay, which is quite a distance away from UCSF, which is the best medical school in the UC system. So he introduced me to his executive vice president, Jim Kelly, and then I went to talk to them. So the idea of Mission Bay was to create a new place where all the institutes for integrated biomedical research will be there. So UCSF can then focus on medicine, and the research moved there. So I took the idea as good. Then I sat down with the developer who owns the land, the railway land. I said, okay, why don't I put in 50% from JTC? I got Neo Chen Con into it, and then the developer 50%. So then Neo Chen continued the discussion, said, sorry, they only want 100% sale of the land. Then that's it. So I said, okay. Then that gave me an idea of being a biomedical park as it is. So in 2000, I went to NIH, our National Cancer Institute, to kidnap people. Richard Klossner was the director, a good friend of mine. His deputy was Ed Liu, and then John Wong was with me. Kong Wai Lung was with me, and then we left the meeting. He says, you want to kidnap them? I said, I will kidnap the number 2, not number 1, because it's too senior. So by December of 2000, I sent an email to Ed Liu. I said, we'd like to move to Singapore to help me set up a Genome Institute. We became GIS. And in his request in email was, could you give me my own building? Okay, so I said, okay, then that's an excuse. So in, I think around maybe May 2001, I got Neo Chen to take the piece of land, which actually belonged to MINDEF when I was Direct PermSec Defense. That I transferred to JTC as 1 North. It was originally called Buena Vista Park. So I told Neo Chen, I want to build me a complex of buildings that can house biomedical research, a separate entity. So from the request by Ed Liu for a building, it became a phase 1, 7 building blocks of 2 million square feet with the help of this our lady architect who helped us do the master planning. I wanted the first block there. So phase 1 of biopolis was 2 million square feet, 7 buildings, all integrated underground basement. So that was launched. So we did the construction in 2001, December. The first building was up in October 2003, fast track. Then I relocated myself into that building in 2003. Then the engineers in NSTB, I changed to ASA, says, what about us, the engineers, we don't have our own park? So that time was, I think CC Han, anyway. So I said, okay, let's look for a piece of land to build for the physical sciences. So I went to where, next to INSEAD, when I was founder chairman of INSEAD for 2 years, INSEAD Singapore. I said, let's use this piece of land next to INSEAD and build Fisher Polis, phase 1, and which was also 1.2 million square feet, high-rise building. And then I told Neo Chen I want to have a subway basement because I noticed Buena Vista has a station, NIH will have a station, Circle Line. Why don't we have a station? And then Neo Chen went to talk to LTA. I said, sorry, we got no budget. We can't afford, so I told Neo Chen we just built the station, invest in it, took us 2 years to connect, and then transfer the station to LTA or SMRT. So today we have biopolis is 3.5 million square feet, Fusion Polis is 2 million square feet, and now we have the startup units, Block 71, 79, what have you. We have Media Polis there. So what we have today is a series of decisions, so which now, Teng Chai is now going to analyze, is this a plan or just a collection of entities? I think the review is appropriate. I think today we have a premier piece of land, 200 hectares. We see a lot of empty space. So going forward, this review is most timely, for which I'm deeply appreciative of it. So may I now pass on the buck to Teng Chai to moderate this group. Thank you.
Mr. Thank you, Mr. Yeo, for the opening remarks. Mr. Yeo, please remain on stage while we invite Mr. Koo Ting Chai, Executive Director of CLC, as well as our panelists and moderator on stage for the launch of the Urban System Study on One North. I would also like to invite Mr. Philip Su, who is here today with us. He's the former ACEO of JTC, who contributed significantly to the publication, as well as Mr. Michael Koh and Limin He, Editorial Committee member, to join us on stage, please. To all them. Yes. Thank you. Can we gather at the front of the stage to take a photo, please? Shall we gather at the front of the stage to take a photo? Thank you all for making this publication possible. Panelists and moderator, please take your seat on stage. The format for today's lecture will start off with a panel discussion moderated by Dr. Arthur Au before a Q&A session with the audience. Kindly hold all your questions until the Q&A session. Thank you. Dr. Au, please, the stage is yours.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Filipio, for telling us the story behind the scene. Indeed, many innovations come from accidental sparks. Yeah. Oh, I thank God for His grace and feel so blessed that today after 19 years when I first presented the raw concept of One North to the Ministerial Committee, I'm able to witness the launch of a book that detailed the journey, as well as moderating this panel discussion. Thank you, Dr. Tan, David, and Manohar for joining the discussions. One North was conceived as a bold experimentations in search for new generations of innovation environment. It served as a beacon of Singapore's determinations to be the Silicon Valley of Southeast Asia. In contrast to the low-density, mono-use science park and technopolis of the 80s, One North believes that by harnessing the energies and social networks of high-density urban life could help us overcome our disadvantage of limitations of land. Indeed, I remember Mr. Filipio at the time keep asking us to increase the density. Yes, higher and higher. And we believe that that could turn our disadvantage of limited land into advantages and unique strength. Let's say the early science park and technopolis painted the pictures of academic scientists and researchers coming together to work on and collaborate on the pre-planned projects of, say, a specific industries. Then I think One North presents the pictures of a large and diverse community of creative talents and innovative talents of multiple industries coming together, having spontaneous fun, forming unexpected relationships, discovering new ideas, and share and collaborate on rich arrays of projects. So in One North, the serendipities and the intensity of everyday interactions of high-density urban life is what differentiates it. So after 18 years today, have we achieved our dream? What can we learn from its past and present? And what lies in the future for the innovation community of Singapore? I think that's today's questions for the panel. And this afternoon, we are very fortunate to have three distinguished panelists with us representing the strategic leaderships at three different development stages of One North. So Dr. Chan has seen the conceptualizations and the building of Biopolis and Fusionopolis Phase 1 as the chairman of the Resource Advisory Panel of One North. Manohar was the Deputy Managing Director of EDB, actively involved in promoting the Infocom and media clusters in One North, and subsequently as the CEO of JDC, overseeing the phase 2 development of biopolis, functional police, as well as the media police. David, today's Assistant CEO of JTC, now oversees the continuous growth of One North, and particularly in the area of community development and enterprise ecosystems. So let's have a warming up questions. What, to you, from a wealth of experience, is an innovation district? David, as the incumbent master developer of One North, would you like to fire off the first round?
Okay, well, thanks very much, Arthur, and thank you, CLC, for inviting JTC to participate in this so-called speaker series looking at One North, so thank you very much. To help me to answer this question, I guess I'll put some slides on so that some of you can see. I think for JTC, we look at One North as, or innovation district as one that is actually an integrated mixed-use district, which we hope to create a work, live, play, learn environment, right? So that's the first concept that we are looking at. Secondly, it's also an ecosystem, or in some countries they call it the triple helix, where businesses and industry together with the Institute of Higher Learning Research Institution, as well as the community come together. Okay, so that's the second point. And the third point is really the district must be sustainable, livable, connected, as well as smart. And it's also a living lab for technologies to be tested for new solutions and new, not only technology and solutions, but also different type of land and space typologies to be tested. And lastly, of course, it must also be a vibrant community with lots of placemaking activities. So that's how we see an innovation districts to be. And if I just can add that today, if you look at One North, we have actually been quite successful over the years, and I must thank all the so-called the visionaries that have started this One North development. If you look at One North today, we have about close to $7 billion worth of investments within One North, and 50,000 workers there, 4,900 people living there. We have close to 190 buildings, and today we are like the research center or technology hub for the biomedical sciences, science, engineering, infocom, and media.
Thanks, David. Dr. Tan, beside One North, do you have some example you would like to share? What is one other innovation district that impressed you?
I would like to perhaps bring us back to the whole idea of science park, industrial park, science park, business park, etc. I think the whole thing should be seen in the context of Singapore's continuous evolution or continuous economic development. Now, we first started with a very low base, labor-intensive approach, right? That would move on to the skills-intensive, capital-intensive, knowledge-intensive, and then finally, this phase where a lot of fusion would take place. Now, One North was conceived originally as Buona Vista Science Hub. That was the original name. And that was created in during the period when Singapore was talking about technopreneurship. In other words, technology and entrepreneurship. And with this kind of backdrop, One North is really about next generation science park. I think the difference is that it has got this vision of integration of work, live, play, learn. So it is about an ecosystem. It is about a community which is connected. So connectivity is extremely important. And I think the collaboration aspect is also key. Co-creation of value. So by bringing different disciplines together, hopefully there will be combustion. Hopefully with some risk-taking approach, there will be a lot of enterprise formation. So I think this is my notion of the innovation district.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tan, for reminding us of the name of One North. For those who do not know, One North was conceived, the name, because Singapore is the only city-state that is 1 degree north of the equator. So we want to be the one and only innovation hubs along 1 degree north of the equator. Mano, you would like to share?
Thanks, Arthur. I think both Chinnam and David have already said everything. I wanted to give an academic answer, but since Philip really said One North is an accident, so whatever I say, you're not going to believe me. But you know, we got to do our job. So But I want to highlight one thing that both David and Chinnam alluded to. If you look at a science park, the first generation of science parks, campus style, a lot of green, a lot of quiet. Why? Because they said in order to do good research, you need quiet. You should not hear a pin drop. When you look outside of the window, it should be all green. Give people quietness to think. But I think that whole concept has changed totally. So actually, when I tell the story, I don't know whether it's true or not. I always say that because One North was conceived before I started, Philip Yeo and his merry men conceived the idea of One North before I became actively involved in it. But the way I tell the story is that actually it started with a constraint because Singapore could not develop a second kind of science park with such low density land use. Therefore, we started intensifying land use. But what really started as a constraint became a huge benefit because especially in this new generation of discovery and seeking innovative ideas, people want to interact. The people today can multitask. They don't need their own quiet office and all that. They can do 3 things at the same time. So really this whole idea of community and the critical word vibrancy, that really is the future. So if you ask about good examples overseas, I would say all the examples are those that generate vibrancy. Research institutes, big companies, small companies, accelerators, everybody coming together and providing that space and opportunity for people to, get together. So I think really that's the future of innovation districts.
Thank you, Mano. I think it brings us to one point you mentioned about Singapore limitations. For those, just for size comparisons, Singapore is 700 plus square kilometers, and Silicon Valley as a region has been growing from 3,000 square kilometers to today's probably close to 4,001 square kilometers. And Mano, in your previous life as government EDB officers, you have been pitching Singapore against many other cities for innovation works, for value creations. So what do you think are the critical elements that make Singapore a compelling place to perform innovation works?
So when you work for EDB, you're always begging people to allow them to meet you. So when you get some time, especially with a senior executive, you've got to make your pitch within the first 5 to 10 minutes, otherwise they'll throw you out. So you got to use 4-letter words to describe your messages. So if I could use a 4-letter word, so it's what I would call the pitch for innovation is really TKCL. T for trust. Singapore is all about trust, intellectual property right protection. What you see is what you get. The government policies don't change. When something is promised, you keep to it. And the point on intellectual property protection is particularly relevant for companies doing innovation. So trust. Second is knowledge. For innovation, you really need strong manpower. And manpower across the value chain. I think it's a fallacy to believe that you only need scientists and doctorates. You need technicians, you need engineers, you need people across the value chain, and that's why our education system actually trains very good people across the value chain. So knowledge is important, and the fact that we have got such an open immigration policy, and that's Philip Yeo attracting all his whales and guppies, bringing in talent that we don't have in Singapore from overseas, sending our best and brightest to go overseas and train in those areas where we are not ready yet. So knowledge, of course, the research institutes that we have, the whole research infrastructure. So trust, knowledge. Third one, C, is connectedness. Connectedness is, Singapore is really connected to the world, both in terms of physical connectivity, very easy to get around the region, trade connectivity, cyber connectivity, and also more and more the connectivity across universities and knowledge centers. And finally, L is for life. You also need to provide a good quality of life for the people. Again, you see a lot of innovation takes place in locations where the climates are good. West coast of the US, of course, Chicago also has got its pockets of innovation, but when it gets cold, I don't know what they do. You look at France, Sophia Antipolis, that area, beautiful place, so it attracts a lot of talent. Of course, Singapore, we cannot get rid of the humidity outside of the aircon rooms, but we provide a very good lifestyle. So I think in a nutshell, this is how we used to make our elevator pitch on why people should consider Singapore seriously. Thanks.
So I'm going to kind of follow up with David now. EDB tends to give very good elevator pitch, and then JTC have to take what the company come and ask for, right? That's always the case, the downstream.
I was in JTC. JTC also give very good elevator pitch.
I think that's why Manohar go and pitch for it, and then he became the CEO of JTC to deliver it, right? So, in your course of overseeing One North now, what is the feedback you receive from companies in terms of the 4-letter words that Manohar has just mentioned?
Well, firstly, just I think Manohar has highlighted all the key components of how we attract investments from overseas. I think as JTC, as a master planner and a master developer, of course, we are more involved with the physical infrastructure. And as what Chairman Philip Yeo said, when Ed comes to Singapore, he said, "Can you give me a building?" So what JTC did was really we built the buildings, okay? And we provided the physical infrastructure. We provided the buildings, we provided amenities, and we created what we call a conducive environment for people to actually be in. I think the other part that we also want to do is that other than just providing the infrastructure, we also make it a place. And once it is a place where people want to go, and it is for the people, all right? It's not for the companies, but it's really for the people. Then I think it will be a place and it will be an innovation hub for investments.
So you have very easy jobs after.
Once they say yes, we'll follow up.
Okay. That brings me to the fact that when we conceive One North in the beginning, we see it as a platform, a physical environment that is not just its hardware, but an integrated approach towards bringing together different industries and different group of talents to the urban networks, to the urban life. And I recall vividly that Dr. Tan, that you, during the early days of One North as chairman of the Resource Advisory Panel, you constantly reminded us that One North has to have a very strong spirit of experimentations. And you talk a lot about a place of fusion. It is a place of fusions. Not just a place of work, live, play, learn, but more so for a place where the science meets the arts, the engineering meets the media. So one question I recall in the early days, as many critics say, is that Innovation District could not be planned. And I guess we can establish the hardware and it takes the programs. But what is your view on that? Could innovations really be planned? And is there any place that come to your mind with regards to having a sustainable spirit of experimentations and culture of fusions? And how does One North fares in that aspect?
Well, I think in the typical Singapore way, innovation and entrepreneurship, in a way, can be planned, can be manufactured. In fact, that was actually the original vision of One North. I was asked to chair the RAP, Resource Advisory Panel, largely because of Lim Neo Chen. So he gave me the assignment, and I worked very closely with Philip Su. And I still remember many hours of discussion with him. Now, this fusion idea is extremely important because as we move up the economic ladder, as we move into the knowledge-based economy, the differentiation is in terms of how do we get the right brain to connect with the left brain. As you know, the right brain is the creative part. So this kind of environment that we are trying to create in One North must bring about that kind of combustion, that kind of fusion, integration of various disciplines, etc. So I think that was the idea behind the master planning of One North. In fact, One North, the master plan was done by Zaha Hadid in terms of the form, etc. But during the RAP discussion involving that particular session, I remember quite clearly because Chan Kim, as well as Renee Morbon, the two authors of Blue Ocean Strategy, they were there. So we were discussing about how we can create a fusion environment. So they were very impressed with this idea of a fusion. So subsequently, the name Fusionopolis was given to phase 2 of One North. So One North is actually planned, although I would agree it is also, in a way, sometimes we have got some accidents here and there. Phase 1, definitely Biopolis. Phase 3, definitely Metapolis, right? And then subsequently, we got this accident in Block 71. It's a different story. I think maybe I'll come back to Block 71 again subsequently. Now, so the whole idea of master planning, can innovation be manufactured, etc.? I think we have done not so badly. Because if you were to look at the Global Innovation Index, the 2018 version, Singapore was rated as number 5 in the world, and number 1 in Asia. And if you were to look at the Bloomberg Innovation Index, 2019, we are rated as number 6 in the world, number 2 in Asia, after South Korea. So I think innovation, entrepreneurship, to be future ready, preparing skills for the future, converting skills, converting profession, lifelong learning, all this will be the essence of Singapore, the DNA of Singapore. Just now Manu spoke about the trust TKCL approach. This is very much into our DNA already. And this is also the version that we had when the World.Singapore strategy, this is the internet strategy of all the SATBOTs, adopting the blue ocean thinking of coming up with the new direction of the individual ministry. So the aggregation of the 15 ministries master plan for the next decade, etc., will be integrated into the World.Singapore strategy. Not iterate dot, but World.Singapore. So EDB had adopted that kind of a formulation in order to sharpen its promotional message internationally. So in conclusion, I think innovation as well as entrepreneurship, we can create the environment. We can promote the risk-taking environment, and we must have, of course, capital to support that. We must have the talent to be able to interact, etc. So One North, in that sense, has created a rather nice ecosystem over time, and therefore resulting in Singapore being looked at quite, I would say, quite highly by a lot of international investors.
Thank you, Dr. Tan. Mano, I'm going to come back to you. After your perfections of elevator pitch in EDB, you joined Ascendas-Singbridge and kind of work on quite a lot of large-scale projects in Asia. In your experience post EDB and JTC, what do you think really are the difference between how the governments in other countries or other cities versus approach towards innovation districts and One North, in this sense, Singapore approach?
So we like to think that Ascendas-Singbridge, in a way, is a combination of EDB and JTC. You should know, you were there. really, so the first the thing is that we moved our headquarters to One North. So Ascendas-Singbridge headquarters is in One North. So we are located in Galaxis building, which is a building that we built just next to the first phase of Fusionopolis. Actually, I didn't know that trivia about how Fusionopolis got its name. So you learn every day. So why did we do that? I think one of the key reasons is really because a lot of our business is outside of Singapore. And they come to us and say, you know, we want to be another Singapore, we want to learn from Singapore, so help us to do that. So that was the first most important, because once they come to our building in Galaxis, and then we tell them the One North story. Of course, the story sometimes is skewed towards the audience. You need to use different elevators for different buildings, right? So, but really, it's a great story to tell, right? And I think I should also add here that One North works because people like Philip Yeo and a few others actually forced all the research institutes to move their operations there. So that's why all the biotechnology related research institutes moved there. Actually, the research institute leaders rather be somewhere else. Don't want to be, they can run their own empire, but we say you don't come here, you don't get funding. So that's a very important motivator. And they don't own the buildings, yeah. And let's also not forget, a lot of innovation actually takes place where technologies cross. If the respective research institutes only work in their own silos, I think the level of innovation you can get actually is more limited. So by forcing them to be at one place, you achieve all this. So we tell them all these stories. Of course, they come to One North, they like what they see. So the way we look at it, I think basically there are three components. There's the hardware, there's the software, and the third is the hardware. Hardware, software, hardware. Hardware is the easiest to replicate, right? I mean, putting up the buildings, is the easiest thing, right? Putting them on time and on cost is difficult, but but then we also tell them that, and especially in certain countries, they like to put up 10 buildings at one go because, so in fact, we tell them you do that, you are shooting yourself in the foot because nobody likes to see a ghost town, right? So in fact, we have to tell them you have to build ahead of demand, but just ahead of demand, not way ahead of demand. So the other one is the software. The software obviously is the most difficult thing. Here in Singapore in general and One North in particular, things work because you have the A-Star institutes, you have EDB, A-Star, JTC, and all the other agencies working so closely together. And you can really provide value. And our research institutes are also given too little to live and too much to die. So they survive, but if they want to survive well, they must do work that is relevant for industry, right? The ability to do that is important. That's part of the software. And I think the hardware, which I would say is becoming more and more important now because all of us actually use that word, which probably in the past we didn't used to use so much, is this whole sense of community. Especially in today's world, where people, with e-commerce, with all these new industries coming up, which are about the sharing economy and all that, this sense of community and all that is getting much stronger. So that's the part where actually we are, even as Ascendas-Singbridge, is doing more and more of. So really in a nutshell, I think these are the things, that people see in One North. And I must tell you, out there, lots of great things happening. And in China, because of the way they are able to build communities, they can build communities faster than us, because everybody is on WeChat and all that, right? So actually, there's a lot of vibrancy happening there. But I think what we have probably been able to do a little bit better than the others is pulling these things together.
Thank you, Mano. And it's interesting to note that actually out there, in China, of course, with 1.4 billion populations, they are able to build community with their AI and there are a lot of apps. Zhongguan Chun is one of the very well-known innovation district in Beijing. It is not really a park per se, it's a district quite distributed in a sense. But the government plays a role in not so much of building, but in putting on policies that incentivize people. And the ground up scientific innovations and enterprises come together. Yeah. So I want to go back to the very early days. I recalled in the launch of the master plan by Zaha Hadid, the then Deputy Prime Minister, Dr. Tony Tan, actually publicly announced that One North, in order to harness the dynamisms and the creativities of innovation of private sectors, the government will not build more than 20% of One North. So how does it fare today? And as the ACO of JDC that now oversees actually the very important phase of One North, which is building community, building place. And we know that community is a little bit hard of a top-down approach. And how do you see we could engage the private sectors more, you know?
Well, thanks, Arthur. I guess when we first started it, we set ourselves some targets, and you highlighted 20%. Today, I think One North we have done close to about 76, if I'm not wrong, 73% is actually done by the private sector developments, right? So if you look at the whole One North today, we have about 200 hectares in size today. Close to slightly more than half is occupied by developments. And within this development, 38 development out of 52 development are actually done by the private sector. So we believe that the government should not do everything. Okay, we believe that it should be a partnership between the private sector, ourselves, as well as the academia. And that's how, when we conceptualize the One North Master Plan, we try to keep to this concept. If you look at some of the things that and this is just a picture of a few latest development by the private sector. The top part, of course, Alice, that's by Baustad. And that's for the startup graduates. That means that after they've graduated from Block 71 or Launchpad, they go to Alice, right? So in a sense, they pay a little bit more rental, right? when they go to Alice. The one in the middle, Live, that's by Escort, okay? Now Ascendas-Singbridge to be capital land. Okay, that's for its co-living space, okay? For people who works there, or for students in INSEAD or ESSEC who wants to live in One North. Okay, the one on the right, Rochester Common, that's by Ascendas-Singbridge. You will have a 5-star hotel with offices as well as learning spaces, right? And of course, the bottom 3 are headquarters by various local innovators, all right? Grab, Razer, as well as Wilma. We also believe that the development of One North should not be all done by JTC and government agencies. We work very closely with partners as well. Working with partners for innovation, working with partners for connectivity, working with partners to build community. So example, One North is the first drone district in Singapore. And it's not us, right? We just created as a drone district. We let the private sector come in and use the space to fly drones, right? For different purposes, right? It could be facade cleaning, it could be inspection of facade, it could be photography, and so on and so forth. Connectivity, right? First mile, last mile connectivity. We let the private sector come in, put in their PMD services or bicycle services, and so on and so forth. The other thing that we are also working is building communities, all right? And this is where we want to build a strong network of people who work there, who live there, and who learns there. Because it is this interaction of the people, I think that's what create the vibrancy as well as the innovativeness of One North as an innovation district. Lastly, also placemaking is very important. And in placemaking, we focus a lot on intellectual as well as non-intellectual, right? For the intellectual one, really, it's the exchange of ideas and collaboration between people. So we earlier talked about scientists within the building interacting with different scientists. Now, in One North, we have a diversity of industry, right? It's not just biomedical sciences, like what you see in Mission Bay, right? We have science, we have engineering, we have media, we have infocom. And some of this technology could be applied, right? Whether is it in biomedical, it could be applied in infocom and media. And so this interaction is very important. And we consciously bring these people together. Not only do we bring these people together, but we get other people to come together. We also this interesting thing called places for people. And we want to make One North a place for people who have actually no relation to One North as well. All right? Create a space so that during the weekends, during the evening, at night, people come in. And here's just two examples, right? One is by a company called Strider. They actually organize it's called Strider competitions, all right? Because One North is on a hill, and then you can actually have kids running around, cycling around using the natural terrain of One North. So these are the activities that we do to sort of enhance the community, build the community, and make One North a lot more vibrant so that it can become an innovation hub.
Thank you, David. I hope the audience come to know that One North is actually a lot more fun than it is, and can join in the programs that JTC is organizing. Dr. Tan, you wanted to touch on Block 71 as an accident earlier on. I want to tap on Manohar's points about what the overseas cities, especially in China, tends to build a lot of building in a very short time. And that actually wasn't very good for the developer, like Ascendas-Singbridge, because it depressed the rental. But on the other hand, the cheap space actually spurs the ground innovation community to come together. So would you like to kind of share, in a way, what is the accident that in Block 71?
The whole One North experience can be viewed as the master planned next generation science park. But it has got the built-in adaptability and flexibility. In fact, it's all about continuous experimentation, prototyping, versioning. The next version is always better than the first version. And I like the idea of Manu's hardware, software, as well as hardware. So instead of using the term master planning, maybe JTC has actually performed a very good job in terms of orchestrating the whole development. And this orchestration will, of course, have the score, right? Otherwise, the soloist will play different tune, and it cannot be integrated. So the whole place is not harmonious. So this continuous evolving arrangement has brought One North to where it is today. And of course, you can say, you ain't seen nothing yet, because I think it continues to evolve, and the lessons can also be applied to other innovation districts in Singapore. Now this Block 71 is a fascinating story. It came about because of the IDM initiative of NRF. NRF has got, of course, the three focus: biomedical sciences, then the water and environmental technology, then IDM. IDM is also linked to the further development of the media industry, which was injected into the Economic Review Committee report. So the creative industries development strategy will come up with the proposal that we should set up the MDA. MDA was actually given the responsibility to oversee the implementation of the IDM initiative with $500 million allocated by NRF. So within the $500 million allocation, $10 million was allocated to this disused Block 71 fractal factory in collaboration with JTC in order to repurpose the whole building to become an IDM, well, in a way, it is the incubation hub. So this particular accident happened just like that. And JTC was perhaps full of foresight in being able to collaborate with MDA on this particular initiative. And we went through some hard time, but subsequently it was a runaway success with NUS Enterprise, as well as Singtel's Innov8, which is the venture capital arm of Singtel, coming in to be the anchor tenant. So I think in a very short period of time, Block 71 has become, in the words of Economist magazine, the highest concentration of startup in the world. So this thing happened by accident. And right now, it has got 6 blocks. It is a very vibrant community now. It's called JTC Launchpad. And JTC Launchpad, or originally, Mediapolis Phase 0, wasn't really in the plan. And it happened just like that. So even though you can say we have got this orchestration of responses, we have got this master planning approach, but in the end, you still need to have the ability to adapt. So this is actually the story behind Block 71. And today, you have Block 71 in Jakarta, in Silicon Valley, and also in Suzhou.
I just want to add on. So I was CEO JTC at that time. I think the best thing I did was I didn't block the idea. Because otherwise it would be really Block 71. Yeah, because at that time it's really a question about, you are not sure of the thing. But I did say one thing. I said we will not tear down that block. We keep it for this experimentation. But I insisted that MDA takes the master lease so that they have skin in the game. And they took it, right? Because otherwise it becomes my problem. Yeah, I'm calling a spade, but it was a collaboration.
Yeah, his point towards the fact that when an accident happens, we've got to grab the opportunities. And if we look at Block 71, which has grown from 1 block to now, I think 5 blocks? 6 blocks, yeah. It is kind of like a microcosms of fusions of different industries, right? There are startups of different industries all over there. And that leads me to also back to Dr. Tan's passions on fusions of industries. In Biopolis, when we first started, it's kind of very similar to the share economy ideas. We bring all the institutions together, they share the expensive equipments, they share the infrastructures, they even share the major basement. Many people doesn't know there's 5 basements, right, among that connect all the 7 blocks. Now on hindsight, I would like to ask Mano as a JTC CEO then, right? I think my media polish was started at your time. By having the clusters, the original ideas was to have biomedical clusters, infocom clusters, each have their unique infrastructure and facilities, so that, first of all, the priority of that industry's talents will come together. Then, therefore, they are placed a little bit apart, but yet not too far. They actually can walk to meet each other. We then open up the third front, which is Mediapolis. What do you think that, looking at Block 71 and looking at now in the macro level of 3 clusters being apart from each other, what do you think that posed a challenge or the opportunities, either a challenge or opportunities for fusing the 3 industry clusters? Maybe I would like Mano to respond to that, followed by David as current master developer of OneNorth.
No, I think first, I was CEO JDC when after all the hard work had been done. So, Philip and Philip Su, Philip Yo, and all the others, Chinnam, and David has been in JDC for much longer. But I think the most important thing that Chinnam said is that we need to adapt, because we cannot pretend to know what the future will be, right? Either you are naive or, who would think that the sharing economy is going to become such a big part of it? Nobody. No matter how visionary you are, you cannot. And that's the other reason why I said it's not only about returns, that rentals get lower if you build too much. Because you need to keep the flexibility, because the buildings you need, the way you connect them has to be different. But if you start building 7 buildings at one go, without knowing what the future is going to look like, you are robbing yourself of the optionality, right? So really that is the message behind it. So I think overall we have done a great job with the master planning of One North, but nothing can be perfect. If we could turn back the clock and knowing what we know today, what would we do differently? I would say we would make the connectivity even more denser, you know, and more so in a climate like Singapore. In a climate like Singapore, even walking 200 meters under the open sun. I will share a secret with you. My building is in Galaxies. I've heard so much about the timber food court, a lot of activity. I've gone there only once. And only once because it was so bloody hot to get there. You know, this is unfortunately Singapore, right? This is the reality of it. After you got to come back and work, right? You don't go and shower, right? So if we can create either covered landscapes, not only a boring covered walkway where you just walk, but really totally integrated green spaces covered. If we could do it that way, I think we would have had even more exciting product. And then those common spaces linking the buildings become locations where people can gather together, right? You know, it's like what do you call it, like a canopy above, right? Nice, you know, tastefully done canopies that create a totally different experience. So, and if you have that kind of experience, even walking, let's say 1.5 kilometers becomes very acceptable. Now, if let's say from Mediapolis, you want to get to the MRT station, it's a long distance, that's why you have all your shuttles and all that, right? And it would not be an issue in a temperate climate, but it is an issue in our local climate. So the point I'm trying to make is we need to become, so while we can get international architects and all to, you know, advise us, but we need to develop competencies that are, or elements that are more suited for our local environment, both in terms of our climate, but also in terms of the behavior of our people. The other thing, I think, which if we could turn back the clock and do better is have more live elements, because today One North at night is still, well, it's not dead, but almost dead, right? So you know, you want to get good amenities. They tell you I only got a lunch crowd or breakfast crowd. Very difficult to get good people in. And then it becomes a vicious cycle, right? You get too many in, people die faster. And then you don't get them. And the good guys will not come in. So if we can succeed in making One North as a kind of a destination also for people, for F&B, and that can only be done with what I said. If you have canopies, you have a nice feel about it, you know, then I think we've got 24/7, and then you get really round-the-clock vibrancy, which will then also help the businesses. So, and I've seen elements of this in other countries. Yeah.
Thank you, Mano. David, would you like to add?
Well, as a master planner and master developer, we are constantly, you know, trying to find out what best suits One North. And yes, there are many things that we can improve on One North. For one is that we talked about how you connect buildings together. One of the things that we are trying out now is that how can you make the walk from point A to point B a lot more exciting? How do I put in F&B facilities in between? How do I put in things in between so that when people say walk from Fusionopolis or from One North Station all the way to Mediapolis where MediaCorp is, it will be an exciting walking journey. So when your walk is exciting, you forget about the heat, you forget about everything else, right? So, and that's what we are hoping to do.
You forget about everything else, but not the heat.
And this is what we are doing. So when we allocate new land, we put in place urban design guidelines to companies and say, please put your F&B at where the walkway is, all right? And around, so for example, when Razer is putting their facility there, we say that the F&B of Razer must be fronting the walkway. That's one, cafe, okay? So that when you walk, you can either pop into a Razer for a cafe, or you can go to Razer, along the way you can play games, okay? So that's something that we ask Razer to put up pop-up stores, pop-up things, so you can play using their high-end equipment, games, and so on and so forth. So is how do we integrate with NUS? Okay, today the NUS separates one north. The NUS and one north are separated by one major highway. That's the AYE. Okay, so question is, how do we integrate one north to NUS? This is just an artist impression done by students, right? So this is not what we're going to do. But it's just to show you that if we can connect one north, all right, to NUS, to Science Park, okay, then I think we can have a greater one north, and the whole one north, Science Park, NUS, can really become one interconnected, integrated innovation district.
Thank you, David. Mano touched on the vibrancies of urban place for innovation district. We have seen a lot in overseas China, for example. One of the reasons because they actually built the leafers. They built a lot of the leafers. And obviously the government's agencies has a lot more flexibility to instill that. They came to see Singapore, they learned the concept, and they actually adapt it. And I think it would be very apt in these discussions actually to kind of urge the government agencies to rethink about the vibrancies of one north that originally we dream of. And I think that is indeed lagging behind, as Mano has touched. At night is almost dead, not dead yet, but almost, yeah. I'd like to, in the interest of time, I think we should open the floor for questions. And before that, I'd like to ask Dr. Tan to share. While One North is still maturing, we have continued to push for developments of new innovation districts. The most recent announced was Punggol Digital District, and David Tan happened to be overseeing that too. So what would you have as a wish list for David Tan? Looking forward, future Punggol Digital District, learning from One North.
I would say we should continue with this idea of continuous experimentation and also continuous innovation. Now, just now we spoke about the lack of live dimension inside One North. Well, I think the concept of co-living wasn't created. That was created only after the sharing economy idea was became popular. So it may be a little bit challenging for us to inject one whole HDB estate into One North, but perhaps we can have more co-living space for scientists, knowledge workers, so that we can use that as the weekdays abode. And we can, of course, go to their own HDB and their own apartments elsewhere. So by creating that kind of co-living environment, and we can see possibly INSEAD students interacting with entrepreneurs, I think that could be a very good fusion place. So I think the future innovation district, I think if we can do this kind of fusion in a much more orchestrated and yet flexible manner, there could be a lot of positive outcome. In fact, the term sandbox wasn't created when One North was first launched. But One North Development Group had a lot of empowerment in order to, in a way, adjust planning norms. But perhaps we can do a lot more. And I'm very impressed with what JTC is going to do, because it does illustrate that JTC will continue to have the innovation spirit, to have a new version, a better version of One North created out of One North itself, as well as in future One North-like districts.
Thank you, Dr. Tan. Mano, you have something to add?
I just got to add, actually I knew about co-living in the 80s when I was in Germany, but that time co-living meant something else. It's living together without getting married. Yeah, But I think that's JTC's destiny, industrial infrastructure innovator. So I think when we were there, we talked, we positioned JTC as that, and I think it's great to see that all these things are happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have gone a very long way for One North, right? 18 years of experience, 18 years of innovation. If you look at One North today, it's quite different compared to other estates in Singapore, and I think all of us have done quite a good job in trying to plan, develop One North. When we started to develop Punggol Digital District, and we made some announcement last year that we are going to do that. It is actually a greenfield site, and we are actually adopting a lot of the new the things that we have tested out in One North, and it will be brought forward to Punggol. Of course, we have the luxury of SIT moving there together with us, which means that we can actually integrate SIT together with our facilities in Punggol Digital District a little bit more, much better. For example, in the new Punggol, SIT's facilities will be within JTC's facilities, and similarly, JTC's facilities will be within SIT's facilities. So these are physical spaces, and that's where you really get this interaction and integration between academia as well as the industries. The other thing that we are really going to look at in Punggol is really how we can integrate the other agencies and other facilities together. So the bus station interchange will be integrated with the MRT station will be integrated together with the childcare centers and the hawker centers and so on and so forth. I mean, in One North, we don't have a hawker center, but in Punggol, we will have a hawker center that provides reasonable and affordable food for people over there. But the other thing that we are trying to do Punggol very differently is how do we integrate the physical infrastructure as well as the digital infrastructure together, right? In One North, when we first planned, digital wasn't there, right? We started using computers, handphones. I think we were still on 2G. Probably just started to look at 3G. But today we're talking about 5G, right? And we can actually integrate the so-called digital and physical infrastructure a lot better. And that's why one of our vision of being an innovation district is really becoming a smart innovation district. And this is what we hope to do in Punggol. And we hope to develop what we call an open digital platform. Singapore, as we move towards a smart nation and smart city, this is what we hope to do. Create an open digital platform which can interconnect all the different systems and services into one single platform. And that platform itself is a digital twin that allows different people that when you want to write an app, when you want to take a data from the building, you want to take a data from the sensors, the platform will be able to provide that data for you, right? And that itself then creates a place where you can do innovation, you can write your program, and so on and so forth. So for Punggol, it will be a smart district, and it will really hope that as a smart district, if it's successful, we can scale that to other parts of Singapore.
Do you have a special quarter reserved for founders of One North in Punggol district? Sorry? Founders of One North.
Yeah, please.
Pioneer generation package.
Punggol is such a beautiful place today, right? HDB is building their HDB flats there. It's going to be fully integrated with the Punggol Digital District, with the students, with the researchers, as well as the industries. And we are going to test bed all these things that you see on the board. And hopefully, what we hope to achieve in Punggol is that frictionless, right? Frictionless means that the convenience of the people who works there, who live there, who learns there, as well as who plays there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tan, David, and Mano. And I think CLC can start writing the book on Punggol Digital District. I'd like to open the floor for questions from the audience. On left and right sides of the aisles, you have the microphone, and also we have two runner with mics. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Just one question. Since Block 71, right, is not within the planning, and so far it has been quite successful. So it's actually a good model of innovation rather than you have a good master plan, then you plan everything, you kidnap talents, which Block 71 don't have to. Yeah, so do you agree that we should be more relaxed on regulation and restriction on a master plan itself to have more such innovation buildings? Thanks. Or community, thanks.
Who would like to take the question? David?
Well, we always believe in flexibility in our master planning. And we always review our master plan every, even URA review looks at master plan every 5 years, every 10 years. Within JTC, we also do that. And we want to be as flexible as possible. We talked about just now about regulatory sandboxes. And indeed, we hope that Punggol, One North can become regulatory sandbox so that we can actually test out new innovative ideas. And we are doing it. So like drone testing. It's the first district that you can actually fly a drone around the whole district. So that's what we hope to achieve in One North. Really this experimentation, this concept of living lab within One North.
And I think we should also be clear, just because things are well organized does not mean that they are lousy. Okay? Because there's a lot of strength in having things well organized. But within that, you must have flexibility. Because we are in many locations overseas, and we see the tremendous disadvantages of poor organization. India is a huge market for us. In India, IT parks and all that, they hire by tens of thousands. But there are places like, Bangalore and all that, we wish that they had been better planned. If they had been better planned, you could have, you would not be wasting so much time traveling and all that. So I think we just have to be mindful that while you must be agile, you must be able to adapt. And I think Chinnam alluded to it many times. But it makes a lot of sense to have a broad plan with certain parameters in place and then adapt along the way. And I think how we responded, and I think Block 71 was also because that was the time where really technopreneurship was taking off. I've been in EDB for many years. We were talking about promoting entrepreneurship and all that, but really it was only in the last, I think, 8 to 10 years that really things have taken off. And it's a variety of reasons, because of the new companies coming up, the stage of development that Singapore is in, and all that. So I think more important is the ability to adapt to changes.
I think industrial infrastructure must respond to the different stage of development of Singapore. So I think what is good about the Singapore system is that we have got the vision, the plan, and yet the flexibility to adjust, to respond. And this is certainly the case of One North, and now we are seeing a lot of the wonderful lessons learned being applied to this another version of One North. And now the lift dimension is definitely very, very strong, which is somewhat not so adequate in One North.
There's a question over this side.
Hi, I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into the concept of the living lab. Could you explain how, apart from being a regulatory sandbox, how you designed the district to allow new technologies to be adapted? How was the physical infrastructure designed so that things could be tested? And if you could give some specific examples of what ideas were tested and what the outcomes of those were. And the second question I had was, you talked about locating the different fields in the same place where previously they were separated, and that encouraged cross sort of interaction and research. Apart from just physically locating them together, what else was done such that there was that interaction? Was it really on a social basis that encouraged people to talk to one another, or was there things done on a structural, systematic basis?
Yeah, David, I suppose this question is for you.
Sure. The concept of living lab is JTC providing the so-called the space for companies to be able to test out their equipment. So an example is that we have One North, and we allow autonomous vehicles to run around. So we designated one area. We let everybody know that there are autonomous vehicles there. We put up proper signages to make sure that when they see this vehicle, they either be a little bit careful if they are worried. So we designate an area and allow companies to test their facilities. Could also be, for example, if there's a new technology that you want to use in your aircon system, we say, okay, fine, we allow you to test it out in our building. And we let you install your equipment in our building and say, let's test it for X period of time, and you can do whatever test you need to do, right? Usually, for such test bed, we don't pay, right? So the concept is we don't pay for such test beds. Companies will come in, we just provide them the space for them to do so. Another example could be street lamp. When we were considering whether to use LED street lamp, we basically said, all right, I give you the street lights, street lamps, I take out the lamps, you put in your lamps, right? And then we don't charge you, right? And then we let you test for a few months, and if successful, then you can then install it in other places. So that's a typical example of how a living lab works. In terms of trying to bring people together, we create activities, right? And you saw that placemaking. We have both intellectual as well as, well, when we say intellectual means we bring people together to discuss about certain topics. It could be how to write a blockchain program, for example. This is an example. Of course, social events as well, where we bring people together and so that they can actually interact. And hopefully with all these interactions, people get to know what they do, and they say, hey, I have a problem, right? How do I solve this problem? So that's an example that what we do. I guess in time to come, we will probably have more such platforms. We could perhaps create an estate apps that allow people to interact through the apps. So these are some of the things that we could do in the future to bring people together.
I'm Maria Boy, architect, planner, landscape architect, and urban designer. Worked in HDB for 27 years, and I learned a lot from HDB, and they have real good vision about digital Congo. It's a place that I like to look forward to. But I've been looking at One North since its formation as a container startup. It is really wonderful that we have very innovative ideas. And I've also been to this startup in JTC, the older block 79 especially. And usually when we go to a place, we just go to the destination, unless in the daytime. But as far as making places is concerned, definitely we like the local architects, planners, and landscape architects to integrate and remake places for you. Because I think it's not just the foreigners are good at design. We have our local talent. So let's give projects to our local talent and make the place a better place, because we are the one who lived here, and we know that we need to have this connectability and vibrant places. And URA has been a real leader in formation of all this placemaking. Like in the city, it's now changing, and we as Singaporeans are very proud that every profession is doing their best. And I would say that definitely we should connect one building to another with linkways and beautiful, attractive places. And even at night, I went to this startup. Timber is a bit noisy, but that's where people want to know what's happening. And so if we have more vibrant places, like in HDB, they are remaking places. So JTC is also doing that. So let's make that place that you couldn't walk through a better place for tomorrow. And you can start inviting local architects, planners, and landscape architects to come in. Not necessarily foreign talent are the best. We also have very local talent. So let's work towards making better places for our people. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any questions? Over here? Yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks. Thank you. Hi, all the old friends. I'm Stephen. I have, in fact, a bunch of students here from NUS as well. Yeah. Having been involved with the IAP of the One North project right from the start, also JTC, also Ascendas-Singbridge, I think I can qualify to say a few things. One of the things that I used to banter with Philip while we were at JTC looking at this, that's the issue of identity. I bet you that if you were to ask foreigners who do not know Singapore, what is the most iconic architecture of district, it will be MBS, right? And if you were to ask about One North itself, it will be Biopolis perhaps, and certainly Block 71, but not One North itself. Did you realize that? Somehow, this brand name has not really kind of taken off. And I remember the very first meeting we had under Chairman, Dr. Tan at Sentosa, when we decided on the name. In fact, he told us, I think Dr. Tan, you remember, that it is not just One North in English that is meaningful, being One North, degree North. It's actually the Chinese name that is even more meaningful. Perhaps you remember, because the Chinese name is actually Wei Yi. It means, 1 degree north of the equator, but it also sounds like we, the only one. However, until today, 18 years, 19 years down the road, we're still not so good at selling that brand, that name. I guess it's not so much necessarily something wrong, because it doesn't really matter, I guess, so long as we can be vibrant, yeah, and we do our part and deliver. So I guess it's okay. But I do want to ask, how can we do more to make sure that this name and this identity be better known, so that when people Google, the first thing that will come out about Singapore icon will be, in fact, One North, right? That will make us all very happy, right? Okay. Number two, that's a comment, but also a question, okay? Number two is that it's important for us to know that every decade as a planner, yeah, we know that every decade of urban designer, there will be new waves of ideas. For that matter, technology, right? So I think during our time, again, we banter on this idea of allowing something innovative. And at that time, the use of Segway, today we don't even hear much about that name, was in fact one of the first PMDs, the two-wheeler. Yeah, it's one of the first. And we were the very first people to say, let's bring them in. At our very first meeting, we said, let's be innovative, yeah? So I want to highlight that we cannot but be excited by the possibilities the next, 50% of the development, next 10, 20 years. Because all these innovations can be brought in, yeah? So I think I'm pretty optimistic about that. And yes, if you know how to walk, if you know the planning well, it's not that bad. Yeah, of course, I have the advantage of knowing the master plan, because Zaha actually gave us a lot of good ideas, the orientation of buildings and the height and the distance, for example. Yeah, it's such that during different days, different times of day, you can always walk under the shadow. Yeah, and then you can use the linkway below. So if you don't know how to walk comfortably, ask me. But can I put a question, my first question? To the
How can we brand and market One North better?
I would say from time to time, we should really do a review. And the review would be regarding the brand equity of One North, what have we achieved, what are the gaps, and what more can be done. So I would strongly recommend that this kind of experiential audit, so to speak, should be done, so that you'll be able to come out with a new version of, a new master plan of the experience of One North. So by building on this kind of foundation continuously, I think the next version will be a better version, right?
I guess we can always improve, absolutely. But I am going back to the thing, One North is also not Orchard Road, right? It has got a targeted audience, which is companies. And I think people in the industry do know it. At least a lot of people visit us all the time. So we are selling One North all the time because it's our job to do that. Yeah, so I guess if it's not going to be an Orchard Road, the focus should be on selling to that audience which is most relevant for us. And I think we can always do better in that area. Yeah.
Well, at least we have an MRT station named after One North. So, and One North, the only MRT station that doesn't start with a capital letter. Okay, so that itself is already a branding. But I take your point, Stephen, that we are constantly working on this. But I must say that One North has been very popular for the business community. And in fact, my colleagues have been asking me, how can I brand One North more to Singaporeans, people living in Singapore? I think with more residential facilities, then people will say, hey, I live in One North, right? Then that talk will be more, right? So I think we are on our way, but we are not there. We will continue to work on it.
I think my feedback to you in actually exactly that too, is how to market and brand One North for the greater community of Singapore. Indeed, One North is very, in my own personal professional works, One North is very well known overseas as an innovation district, very well known. Yeah. I'm, due to the interest of time, I'm going to give just one last question. I think this gentleman has raised his hand. Yeah.
Thanks very much. I'm the lucky guy, I guess. Hi, you mentioned earlier the problem statement of the AYE acting as a barrier to community integration on both sides. Several cities have faced indeed the same problem. And I can give you examples of cities like Boston, for instance, which has the Big Dig project. You've got Santiago in Chile, which has also got its tunnel project. So the approach has been to push all these highways underground and then create these green corridors which link up all the different communities together. So the question for you is, how practical is this in Singapore, and what kind of cooperation will you need, for instance, with the RTA or with others, to make this happen? So has this been considered at all? What are the alternatives?
Well, the plan is there, but we're not going to lower the AYE. We are looking at building over the AYE. Yeah.
I think the terrains on the national universities are one of open for that. And trust me, Singapore is 700 kilometers. They have studied a lot, many times. Yeah. I'm sure that will materialize in time to come. Thanks for your comment and suggestions. I'd like to close the sessions by before I do that, maybe anything the panelists would like to add before I close the sessions?
No, I think it's been a good session. Go ahead and close it.
So in response, I don't have four-letter words to close it, but I think having done in my professional works, we've encountered many different cities in terms of large skills, developments and innovation developments. I would say is One North. I would conclude from the discussions that we have come a long way, and we have started something, and it's yield quite a good results now for Singapore. There's actually no such thing as unplanned. The 101 of urban architecture will tell you no such thing as unplanned. It's just the degree of planning. Every cities will have something that they talk about and plan. Maybe just 2 lines, and then they let the developers take charge. An audience touched on Mazda and Sondong, which is very well planned by private sectors. Without the governments very much involved in the industries, it doesn't really work. Singapore, we have to understand that Singapore is very small. 700 square kilometers is very small. In all the cities I went to work with, I put Singapore maps onto it. Every single city is at least 15, 10, 20 times bigger than us. Even Silicon Valley is so many times bigger than us. Land is indeed very precious to us. The question then becomes, how do you use the land? And I think One North opened up a very strong case studies for all those who are interested to harness the best, both in real estate values in terms of the real estate value as well as the community values and innovation energies that is presented in all the world top cities. If you look at innovation district, they are always happening in top cities with very, very vibrant and interactive urban life. And I think what I could conclude is we are very lagging behind in terms of the original visions of vibrancies for One North versus now in terms of injecting leaf. I'm glad to hear today that we are doing more, and I strongly urged that we should do even more. And as far as One North is concerned, we really do it the Singapore way. And one thing that we do need to have more is to engage the private sectors, the ground-up energies of Singaporeans, and therefore the branding and marketing towards the larger community of Singapore. I do want to talk about the misconceptions that the planning was fully foreign talents. I think JDC suffer from lack of marketing themselves for One North, right? And same, Zaha Hadid is a very big name. But actually, it was, if you ask Zaha Hadid team, they will tell you it was a full collaborations between their team and JDC planning team then. It was a very large, brief conceptual master plan with a lot of detailed inputs from local talents. And that's the reality that it came about. And it have these flexibilities in the urban structures to allow JDC to continue to innovate. Maybe the one question to bring back was, do we do it faster so that it connect up even more, so that the environments, the place really become one? At this moment, it is seen as few clusters. So that's maybe food for thought as we move forward. Thank you all for attending these sessions, and I'm sure the panelists will welcome off-sessions discussions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Au, Mr. Khiatani, Mr. Tan, and Dr. Tan, as well as the audience for your participation. We hope you have enjoyed today's lecture and take away with you key sharing by the panelists, which include the 4 letters, TKCL, trust, knowledge, connectedness, and life, which are critical elements that contribute to innovation ecosystem. We also noted the importance of adapting and responding to changes during different stages of Singapore's development, but at the same time maintaining that spirit of experimentation that enables delightful accidents such as Block 71 to occur. As One North continue to develop and grow, we look forward to a vibrant, interconnected, as well as well-shaded One North that's conducive for pedestrians, and also upcoming developments which provide more co-working and co-living spaces. If you haven't grabbed a copy of the latest urban system study on One North, my colleagues will be able to pass you a copy on your way out. Our next lecture is on Juggling Jakarta, Urban Challenges and Solutions, taking place next Wednesday, 13 March at 4 p.m. in this auditorium, where the Deputy Governor of Jakarta, Pak Oswa, will share how his city of Jakarta has transformed over the years, as well as their efforts in strengthening the city's social resilience against urban challenges and natural disaster. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.